I'm Mark Villasana, owner of Northwest Insurance Agency and proud SMU alumni. Insurance rates right now are awful. You know it and I know it. But give me a call and let's take a look at your current policy and see if there's anywhere I can save you some money. My phone number is 214-352-5656, or you can email me at markv@nwagencies.com, or just give me a call to talk SMU athletics. Pony up.
This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody.
1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I am Billy Embody. With me is Hayden Howerton on this podcast. We're powered by our friends at Northwest Insurance Agency. But before we get into talking about the big uglies, got to remind you guys to subscribe to ontheponyexpress.com for just $1 for your first week. Spring football is just days away now. And look, you're going to be, if you're an SMU fan, hoping to get a glimpse, you're going to be driving over to campus, and you might as well do it in a new car from the Thomas Auto Group. So make sure you head up 75, mention on theponyexpress.com, and get employee pricing on new and pre-owned vehicles from the Thomas Auto Group, whether it be Ford, Subaru, or Volkswagen. Check out the Thomas Promise today.
At Thomas Auto Group, the Thomas Promise includes the low price promise,
the pre-owned promise,
and the 72-hour exchange promise.
And finally, the 100% customer satisfaction promise. So shop Thomas Auto Group today, home of the Thomas Promise.
I promise you, Hayden's going to enjoy this one as we're talking offensive line. Big spring for SMU, though, as a lot of questions of this group, coached by Garen Justice. And Hayden, look, I can wind you up and just let you go the entire podcast, I'm sure, but this is your bread and butter. This is a group that you have a lot of respect for with Garen Justice leading it. But there's some probably tough conversations going on in the building of how you take it to that next level.
Obviously, everyone knows I love Garen, and I love this group. I think this is a really talented group that could go out there and be even better than last year's group. But there are tough conversations that need to be had in the building because I think some guys on this offensive line unit feel a little overly secure about their starting probability going into the 2025 season. Before I get too deep, I do want to wish Garen Justice happy birthday. It is his birthday today, so happy birthday, Coach. But guys, there are a lot of question marks on this offensive line unit. We're going to face a lot of really talented and really physical fronts this season coming from Clemson, Miami, Louisville, as well as the Texas teams from Waco and Fort Worth, in the Baylor Bears and the TCU Horned Frogs, which the Baylor game, in my opinion, is what's going to set the tone for what this season is going to look like. That will be no secret, and that will be something I will continue to harp on as this offseason goes on. But look, the biggest woe in 2024 for this offensive line unit was getting into a rhythm before we started conference play. We did not have a good showing against Nevada or BYU, but fortunately we were able to at least get a respectable showing against Florida State before going to Louisville and finally playing well. And really, I think this unit played well all the way until the ACC championship and the college football playoff first round when a really good defensive lineman in TJ Parker, who guess what, we're going to have a chance to see again when we go to Clemson, South Carolina, and projected top 5 and possible first overall draft pick, Abdul Carter, completely outmatched us at the tackle spot specifically. And look, those are two guys that are going to make a whale of money in the NFL. I mean, premier pass rushers. We saw the Cardinals sign a big one today for $75 million. Sweat is who they ended up signing. That's where those two guys could really end up making a crazy amount of money in the NFL just to rush the passer. So I look at SMU's pass protection as a question mark at the tackle spot. I think it's one of those deals where Kevin is not going to be able to just be able to look over his shoulder at all times. He needs to be able to sit in the pocket and have the trust from that offensive line unit to where he can do his job because we're doing ours. So I look at SMU's returners and who they're bringing back this year. You're bringing back Logan Parr. That was a big get. This is his 6th year after starting 13 games in 2024. And look, he was banged up a lot of the season last year. and is looking for 2023 type play after, in his opinion, a little bit of a disappointing 2024 campaign from what I talked to him. I thought it was still a really productive season. He was third team All ACC, and he's our best returning pass blocker for the Mustangs. Sorry, guys, I'm coming off of a cold here real quick. We're also bringing back PJ Williams. Started every game for us in 2024, including 11 starts at right tackle. He was really a point of consistency for us at that right tackle spot. Third team All ACC, and he was our best run blocker in 2024. He was a guy that, Billy, during training camp, we had looked at as, hey, this guy's going to have a big breakout year for us in 2024. And I thought it took him a while to get going, but eventually he did play to that level that we were expecting. Last but not least, we're bringing back Savion Byrd. Former highly touted prospect out of Duncanville. He did go to Oklahoma first before transferring back to SMU. He started 12 games at left tackle last year. This guy's a freak athlete, and that can't be underestimated. He is probably the most gifted guy I've been around at the college ranks. But Savion gets in trouble when he does not play alignment or technique sound football. His biggest challenge has to be relying less on just his raw talent and more on the coaching and the scheme that's installed. I see Savion as a guy who could develop into a guy that plays with great technique, attitude, pad level. As he throws his hands well, he has, a monster punch. He caves guys' chest in, but he can't make these dumb mental errors that I've seen him make time and time and time again. There is going to be a tackle battle between Savion and some of our key additions that we're going to bring in. But Billy, I look at the guys that are coming back and it excites me, but I also know we have a lot of work to do.
Indeed. And look, you covered the base layer of where this position group stands as far as personnel, the stars, the returners, who they lost, and things like that. It is really going to be such a key spring for Savion Byrd. And I think in a way, like, his development has to match the overall offensive line's development. Like, if Savion Byrd drastically improves, that is huge for the offensive line and a good sign that entire unit is going to drastically improve. And you had a 1,000-yard rusher, incredibly productive running back. You had a quarterback who was, really, really good. Obviously, he has the escapability. He made some plays, was pressured at times and things like that. But overall, man, like, you can't look at this offensive line group after playing an ACC slate, playing TCU, playing BYU, and say, oh my gosh. And you have to look at it from the standpoint of they were that bad against Nevada that they had sweeping changes. So the staff immediately turned and started fixing it. So the final group, what they put together, was very much good enough to play at a high level in the ACC in year one. And then you face some gazelles and some unicorns and all of that in the last 2 games of the year. That's the difference between a Clemson. That's the difference between a Penn State is some of those guys that you have. And SMU had guys like that, like Elijah Roberts and Jared Harrison Hunt, and the pass rushers like Jafari Harvey and Turbo and Cam Robertson playing at a high level. But those pass protectors, those elite pass protectors on the edge, is really what is kind of the difference there. And I thought PJ Williams, you nailed it. Like, we thought, he was going to be left tackle, huge year. A lot of people talking about him being, going to have a decision to make after the year or whatever. And he ends up having to flip over to the right side and kind of fix that position. And it was an adventure for SMU to figure out the offensive line, but they did it, and they got it to a point where it was good enough for them to be in position to go to the college football playoff, to do the things that they wanted to do, and make that ACC championship appearance. But I look at what they brought in, and I think they pressed the right buttons here.
I agree. I'm looking at the guys they brought in, and I'm going to throw Andrew Chambly into this group as well, because he got limited reps last year as well. And he's a guy
hurt
that
early.
Got hurt. He's going to have an opportunity to compete for a starting job on this SMU offensive line. But you look at the other guys they brought in as well. They bring in Joshua Bates, transfer from Oklahoma, only has a couple of career starts, big, thick interior offensive line body, 6'3", 309. He could definitely challenge for that open center spot. Pair that with Addison Nichols, transfer from Arkansas, came from Tennessee before that, SEC starter, 6'5", 329. He started 9 games for the Razorbacks last season. And he has the size to play any position, but I see him more as a guard for SMU. So as we move over to the tackle spot, we look at Zion Nelson, transfer from Miami, 32 career starts, bringing in a lot of experience, although it hasn't been recent. He has not started a game since the 2021 season, and he's looking for a change of scenery as he could make a strong push for the starting tackle job. Because guess what? He played under Garin Justice. He knows that system when they were together at Miami. The one that I'm most excited about seeing on campus, and we won't get to see him until later this year, he did not come in the spring, Jermod Odoms. 5-star offensive tackle, 20th best high school player in the country. This is a prototype franchise left tackle kind of kid. Played high school football at Houston Lamar. If this guy was here in the spring, I think he has a serious possibility to start week 1. But where he's going to get here in the fall, there's going to be some catching up to do. I think we could see him kind of in a role that Andrew Chambly played, where you play him a little bit just to get him some experience, redshirt him, and then get him back for next year. Or the unthinkable happens. He just comes in and dominates, and then guess what? You got a freshman starter on that offensive line. And he's a guy that has a mean streak. You saw it at the Navy All-American game. He was dumping guys. I mean, other All-Americans. I mean, he's putting on their back. So really excited about this kid. I know Garin is as well. And our other freshman signees include Abel Hoopi from Hawaii, Devin Ferris from Houston, Texas, Drew Hill from Corona, California. He's a spring enrollee, so he's already here. And then Sione Mau from New Zealand, which, Billy, this is a big kid. I mean, doesn't know a lot about American football, but 6'8", I think he's like 380 is what he's listed at. I mean, 10.5-inch hands. I mean, if this guy can figure it out, he'll be unstoppable. But he has a ton to learn about American football. But if there's the guy to get it done and to be able to coach him, it's Garin Justice.
The newcomers are so interesting because everyone has such a unique story. Like Josh Bates, OU, played some games, got some starts, kind of pressed into duty due to injuries, including that to Branson Hickman, and gets back to, or gets with a new program. He's from Durango, Colorado, and he told me, he's like, I just want to win. Whatever I need to do. He's kind of like a good sidekick with Nate Anderson, because Nate's kind of got that mindset. He just happens to be from Texas, but Josh Bates is the Colorado version of that. Just wants to do whatever it takes to win. But Addison Nichols, an Eagle Scout, like does everything you could ask for. And even SMU released a video, and he was breaking down the team. That's the type of instant leadership that he brings. And I mean, he is, to start for Sam Pittman on the offensive line, it's a big deal. And SMU, I think, has a really good one. I think he could be all conference when it's all said and done. And Ja'Kai Clark, I thought, had his moments where he was playing really, really well. And then others where, it was kind of an adventure at times. But Addison Nichols is like how you draw it up. I mean, he is, there's a reason why Tennessee and Arkansas both wanted to have got him. And then if you get Zion Nelson to pan out, then all of a sudden, like if everything goes right, you're looking at almost like an entire 2 deep of starters, and not in the like cliche way of like, we feel like we've got a 2 deep of starters. It's like, no, you have Zion Nelson, who was destined for the NFL before injuries. You have Addison Nichols, who's been a multi-year starter starter in the SEC. You have Josh Bates, who started some games in the SEC. You have Jermod Odoms, who could step in and play right away. Well, if all that happens and you've got the returners we talked about, that's a really good situation. But it's a long, long way out with Jermod. But my point about Jermod would be, and this is obviously for fall camp, just physically he looks the part, and that nastiness that he displayed. Remember a few years ago, SMU was rolling out Marcus Bryant as a true freshman. You started as a true freshman. It's hard to do. And that's, when you're as physically imposing as him, you can't take it off the table either.
No doubt. I mean, my main concern for Jamad is just what does he look like in the weight room?
Yeah.
Because his pure size at the high school level is enough to demolish these kids, to steamroll them. But when you get to these big opponents, like you look at the Joshua Farmer from Florida State. You're not just going to lean on that guy and move him. You have to have the ACC strength and conditioning to back it up. And we'll see what he looks like when he gets on campus. I really like what I've seen so far, but it wouldn't surprise me if he needed a year in Coach Grizz's system, and then he's really ready to go for the 2026 season. But a lot to replace in this unit. You lose Justin Osborne, extreme veteran for SMU, played a bunch of football, captain, played really hard. I mean, that was one of the things that I noted the most about Justin was he was a through the whistle and then some in individual, in walkthrough, in game. I mean, it didn't matter. This kid went full speed all the time. It was really, really admirable. Ja'Kai Clark, it's always tough to lose the starting center, regardless of what happens, regardless of our personal feelings about how were there some things that were mis-ID'd last year? Absolutely. Did I think we could have communicated some more on, like, there's a Clemson sack that comes to mind where essentially the Red Sea just opens up and one of the D linemen just run right through. So you obviously need to eliminate things like that. But he was our highest rated pass blocker in 2024 by PFF. And then finally, you lose Ben Sparks. Rotational sixth man, played with a mean streak. He might come work for me. We're working out contract details right now. But he's one of those guys that I'm going to miss seeing around. It's going to be weird seeing a new 75 on the hilltop after the last, I think, 8 years since anybody else has worn it, which that makes me feel old. But as always, coached by Garen Justice, just a true pro. I mean, highly advanced in both scheme and technique. He had his name in the hat for the Florida Atlantic head coaching job last year. That's just the level of respect that the coaching community has for Coach Justice. I'm glad he's our guy. Selfishly, I didn't want him to leave, but also I would have been really happy for him if he'd have been a head coach. But I'm glad he stuck around for at least a few more years here.
Yeah, it's this entire staff. I mean, we're days away from spring ball, and they're all back. I mean, you're seeing some shuffling, some GAs, some analysts, and things like that. Guys getting new opportunities. Which, I mean, if that's not happening, then you're kind of like, okay, all right, interesting. But when you have your entire coaching staff back, that's a really key piece of this team and kind of how SMU can lean on that culture and lean on that knowledge of what is expected to make it happen. And the offensive line, it's a group that is tight. You can tell they play for each other, and I mean, they lose some leadership, but they also have a lot of guys that are talented now. You can't ever say anything without basically ribbing the guys that are just leaving. But man, Addison Nichols, like that's a really strong replacement at center for Ja'Kai Clark. Justin Osborne, man, that guy is an absolute warrior. Like, is it time that somebody else kind of figures out that spot? That's probably the position that I'm most concerned about, because you have Savion Byrd, Andrew Chamblee, PJ Williams, Zion Nelson, eventually Jamad Odoms. You have so many options at offensive tackle, and we saw that it was at least serviceable in league play last year. How do you get that group to the next level is probably the biggest thing that has to happen over the course of the offseason. And in spring, they'll have, their hands full with another defensive front that has guys all over the place that they hope pan out. But it just seems like that they weren't, like, they found really unique ways to not necessarily just say, okay, we're going to rely on Savion Byrd to get better. We're going to rely on PJ Williams to get better, Andrew Chamblee to get better. Like, they still address the positions, which I thought was key.
Yeah, competition breeds the best performance out of everyone. It doesn't matter if you're first or if you're the 17th best offensive lineman in that room. Everybody's going to get better because everybody's going to be competing on a day-to-day basis. But something I want to talk about with all these tackles that we're bringing in, and everybody's going to be like, oh, they're tackle bodies for sure. And other people are going to look at them and be like, oh, well, you can just slide Savion into guard. He did it at Oklahoma. Guys, something I want to talk about is how hard it is to go from tackle to interior. It is two different worlds. My last game in the NFL, they had to throw me out at left tackle. We had injuries. We had things like that, and still gave up no sacks on the stat sheet. But I mean, in all seriousness, it is so much more difficult to get out there, and you're patient at left tackle. You get out, you're in your sets, and you're essentially waiting on that DN to make a move so you can throw your hands. At guard, at center, you're bringing your hands straight up off the ground and you're striking, which is two completely different things. At tackle, you have a little more time to adjust. Maybe you can clamp with that inside hand. At guard, center, you have to hit with your hands and strike and land a great initial punch immediately, or it's over. So it's two completely different play styles. It takes a really good player to be able to do both. So that's going to be another key of this position battle to watch, is who is going to be able to slide in from tackle to guard when we need it. Jermod Odoms, being a freshman, being a guy who's just going to come in and try to learn the system as fast as possible, is probably a guy that if I'm Coach Justice, I'm probably saying, let me give him time to just develop a tackle. And let me use one of these other guys like Zion, who has played a lot of college football and been around, his sixth spring ball, I think is what this will be for Zion Nelson. Maybe I can slide him in at guard. Maybe I can give him some reps at alternate positions, because the more you can do, the longer you'll stay around, is historically what they always told me in the NFL, things like that. But it is really true. When you have an offensive line unit where you can kind of mix and match in the spring and you can get your time for everyone to develop, where you can go into the fall. And this is my key for what success looks like for this offensive unit. You have to find your 9 best guys to go into fall camp to say, we're going to let these 9 fight for those 5 starting spots. You also have to develop guys who are going to play extremely hard for as long as they can go. You have to build an ability. It is a learned skill to execute in Rhett Lashley's offense with the code words, the high tempo. You're doing a lot of motioning formationally, things like that, where it is a learned skill to be able to get your code word, line up, read the defense, and know what you're supposed to do immediately. And then finally, and most importantly for me, you have to find a tackle who will be able to play at a high level physically, mentally, and technically. Could be Savion Byrd. I'm not ruling that out. But there's lots of options now for that position specifically.
They're not going to settle, and you shouldn't settle either when you look at our friends at AKM Turf and Greens, supplying our friends at On the Pony Express with the best turf and green experience to revamp your backyard or your front yard. They've done entire yards of turf. Alex Carpenter and the team over there. You can learn more about their business and how they can help you at info at akmturfandgreens.com. Mention On the Pony Express or code PONYUP for $500 off your project today. Perfect time to get them working on your backyard and making it look incredible in time for the spring and summer. So, Hayden, as we close out here, is there a guy that you're really leaning on? And you brought up something earlier that I want to hit on as well, but is there a guy that you feel confident of taking like that next step in their role? And it's so early and I'm putting you on the spot, but I'll let you think about it while I say this about Logan Parr. Last year, Logan Parr had that offseason shoulder surgery. It was something that he was still recovering from. Now I think, again, kind of full offseason, his ability to know this is it for him, that chance to really punch his ticket to the NFL, which I think he'll have a shot to do. He'll be healthy. He's kind of one of your top leaders in that group, without a doubt. That's where you can kind of lean on him a little bit to really kind of take the reins here, as well as a guy like Addison Nichols who's coming in and see how the cream rises to the top of the other positions, because those position battles are going to be quite intense.
Yeah, I like those two for sure. I like the leadership that both guys have already shown. I mean, Logan obviously has a lot more street cred at SMU, but you bring in a guy like Addison Nichols, who has a lot of credit around college football, playing in big-time SEC games, and he's already breaking down the team. So he's a guy that Coach Justice, the other O-linemen in the room, are going to look to see how he responds when things get hard. Because in spring ball, these guys are going to be challenged. There are going to be days where it's not going to be, this is awesome, I love college football. It's going to be, this sucks, but how can we get through it and get better? And ultimately, and this one is going to be kind of some uncharted territory for SMU because it's never happened before. Dermot Odoms. We've never had a 5-star prospect come into SMU as a freshman. Young guys around the program are going to look at Dermot of how's his attitude? How is he approaching things on a day-to-day basis? And I've never met the guy. I've only seen how he acts in practice and interviews and things like that. I'm hoping he comes in with the right attitude, because whatever attitude he brings, it will be contagious to the other young guys in the program, because they'll look at it as, well, that's how he does it, so why can't I do that too? So he needs to be a young leader among the team who's going to know his role, whether that's you're a starter or, hey, 5-star, go down on scout team and get our D-line ready for the week. He's going to have to understand his role and do it at a high of a level as possible with the best attitude possible for our unit to be successful.
And, we got this far into the podcast, and this shows you the depth a little bit here, but guys like Kayshawn Patterson or Kayshawn Sapp, Paris Patterson, you have King Large, going into his second year. You have Graham Uter going into his second year. You have Alex Woods. There are other players that by no means am I saying with that group that it's like now or never. But as far as like the guys they signed from high school, Graham Uter, Alex Woods, King Large, you want to see them make a move this spring as well. And all of those guys have really been kind of, looked at as interior guys. King Large probably play a little bit on the outside, but there are opportunities here to make a move in spring. And it doesn't just go for the guys that we spent a lot of time talking about who have, a little bit more acclaim and stats or starts and things like that. That's the thing with the offensive line, is you've got to find your guys who maybe it is their time. It's a long-term developmental position most of the time, unless your name's Hayden Howerton. And that's kind of the interesting thing about this offensive line, is there are so many names that at least on paper you could say, okay, we got to watch this guy because he was making some noise, at center. He was making some noise at guard. Talk about Alex Woods and Graham Uter there in particular. And then King's a versatile guy. So how can they make noise in the spring? All the focus is on the guys that are returning, that played a lot of football, or guys that came in. It's a chance for these guys to make a name for themselves.
I like Graham Uter. I like Alex Woods. I mean, I think both of them can contribute. I think Graham Uter has a little bit of a taller ceiling. No pun intended. He's like 6'5", but he also played at a little bit of a lower level of competition coming out of high school, from Alabama, Bayside Academy. He wasn't used to the speed of the game, and Ben was filling me in about Graham came up to Ben and he was like, I don't know if I blocked Elijah Roberts one time this year. It was in like November. And Ben hit him with, hey, buddy, I've been here 3 years and I think the same. So he has had the opportunity to go against great D linemen and develop. But in spring, like it or not, guys are going to go down. You're going to have days in spring ball like you do every year where, all right, guys, we have 11 offensive linemen for 3 huddles today. So you're going to have to rotate. Guys are going to get a lot of reps, but it's how you take advantage of that. And it's not just O-line, it's every position group. Like I remember before the practice before COVID, on the Friday practice before we went home for our 2-week spring break, we had 6 O-linemen, we had 4 DBs, and we had like 5 wide receivers for 3 huddles. It was awful. But everybody gets a ton of reps, and it really is an opportunity for you to go against different guys from different huddles where, hey, maybe I was a scout team guy last year, but guess what? Now I get to go block Alex Kilgore in space. Things like that where you are going to develop and really learn to master your craft in the spring. So I can't wait for this offensive line unit to get out there. I'm interested to see how they're going to gel with all of these spots, and there's going to be a lot of movement, but that's what spring is for. You're going to see, all right, let's say Zion and Josh Bates are really great and a deuce together, on the right side. But, I actually really like Logan and PJ, in their Bs on the left side. It's things like that you really don't see until you just get out on the field and are doing it live.
And even when it goes through, fall camp and spring and all the changes we saw in the offseason, might not pan out. I mean, there were sweeping changes that happened on the offensive line just after one game. And you don't want that to happen. That's not, in particular when it's not injury related. But that is what, they're going to work to avoid, I would say, this time around, because, everybody will probably be able to, no offense, look good against East Texas A&M.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be the reality. You got to be ready for Baylor the next week. And also you need to be ready for the Masters, Hayden. And no, it's not us going on status jet and heading over to Augusta for it. I'm talking about our friends at Roback with their Azalea collection. And guess what? Code PONY20, that's PONY20. It is a new code for those of you who have followed the pod for a while now. This code is new, so make sure you take note. It's PONY20 for 20% off your first order at Roback. That's RHOBACK.com. First-time customers only. And oh, by the way, their Azalea collection, you got kids polo. I got to check the sizes on Jack. You got ladies wear. So be the hero and say, hey, honey, we're going to be watching the Masters. Yes, I do look good in this brand new polo. Let me introduce you to what I got you. And so you can hook it up with their Azalea collection at Roback.com. It's perfect for the Masters. And again, code PONY20 works as well for that. So check them out, Roback.com. Great supporters of us on the Pony Express podcast. And we're both rocking Roback as well. So win-win there. This has been a good podcast on the offensive line. Hayden, I guess I want to close with this. And every now and again, we'll do way too early predictions and things like that. But do you have a thought on who you might expect to be the starting five, and then who you could see being the actual, or I guess maybe like who would you expect at this stage? You don't have to be right, obviously. I'm wrong all the time on stuff like this, but who you could see being the starting five, and then maybe who you would prefer, knowing what you know.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I would say from left to right, like if we were playing a game on Saturday, no spring ball, we're just rolling out there with who we have signed and committed. I'm going to say left to right. I'm going to go Zion Nelson. I'm going to go Logan Parr. I'm going to go Addison Nichols.
This is the tough one.
Right. Yeah. Right guard is the tough one. I might go Nate. Just with what he did last year and how he's already performed for us. I'm probably going to put Nate out there at right guard.
Little veteran presence already.
Yeah,
like it was tomorrow.
Yeah. And then at right tackle, PJ Williams.
Okay.
But after spring training camp, kind of depending on what we see, who I would like to see, who if everybody's going to be an All-American on this offensive line, I'd like to see Jermod Odoms out there. I would like to see what he can do. What's tough is I still want to see PJ, but I also probably want to see Andrew Chamblee somewhere out there too.
Yeah, it's the hard part.
Yeah, that's where it becomes tough.
Like if guys are healthy, if guys are panning out and you're able to give it their all, and Zion Nelson is healthy, Andrew Chamblee stays healthy, you're not, and this is probably the interesting piece of the offensive line, I would say, because like interior, you could say that in a way there's been kind of a natural pecking order of who's next, who's taking the reins and things like that, even if they've been brought in at times throughout the years through the transfer portal. It just seems a little bit more natural. Like right now at offensive tackle, let's just say everybody's healthy. Let's say Zion Nelson gets the clean bill of health. Say Andrew Chamblee stays healthy. I mean, you have a logjam at offensive tackle even before you get to this like summer when Jermod shows up and they add other freshmen into the mix and things like that. Like it is a incredibly difficult job to do.
The thing that I'll say, and I know Coach Justice feels this way too, I don't care if it's 5 centers or 5 tackles out there. I just want the best 5 out on the field August 30th. So it doesn't matter if we have a bunch of Coastal Carolina 5'9" guys taking it to BYU, whatever year that was in 2021, or if we're looking at Oklahoma of the late 2010s where they're all 365, 6'8" monsters.
Yeah, those were fun offensive lines to
Yeah.
watch back there. Sam Bradford and
Yeah.
Andrew Jones and all of them slinging it around. But and I think the start to last year, I think, was a really good learning experience for.
Mhm.
And as a coach, you always want to be learning. Like, there's nothing wrong with learning experiences. I think I don't think they'd object to me saying this at all, but I think they kind of forced it. Like, they kind of tried to make fetch happen with Justin Osborne at center.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And I really wanted, you want to talk about things that I wanted Justin Osborne to be that dude at center. And in practice, he looked great.
Yeah.
And when they got into the game, it just didn't go well. And unfortunately, it was like, it was that bad. And he played through a lot. Like, I don't think it's not one of those things that'll probably come out with him. But, I think to your point, like, the best five, whatever that is, like, get him out there. And if that means, like, and I know you talked about sliding from, edge to being an interior protector. I mean, does a PJ slide into guard? I mean, and Andrew Chamblee steps out. I mean, this is where, and Garen Justice said this to me last spring. He said, "Oh, we're going to be tinkering just so that you guys can talk about it all off season." I mean, so that's what the offensive line is with them right now. It's trying to figure it out.
We need to get him on here.
Yeah.
I want to pick his brain on like his biggest challenges and things like that he's gone through. Because another underrated piece of it, and I'm not trying to sit here and bore y'all with no line talk all night.
No, people like it. I mean,
the left to right transition is harder than people anticipated it was. Or anticipate it to be. I was at SMU essentially a career left guard, and in 2021, we made the adjustment where instead of having Jalen Thomas and I be the left tackle and left guard, we were both of the guards, and it just, for whatever reason, we couldn't wrap our head around quick enough in the first couple of games of that adjustment to where I think La Tech was when we said, all right, experiment's over, and we kicked us both back to the left side, which ended up being fine. We still rushed for 350 on TCU.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult. That's why they pay guys in the NFL. Hey, if you're not a starter in the NFL, you better play everything.
Yeah.
Because you have a guy who's your backup center and both backup guards. You have a true swing player who plays everything but center. And then you have a true swing tackle who plays both tackles. And that's how you survive in the league, is being able to do that. But it's difficult, and that's why it's imperative that you learn to do it in college. So I think when Coach Justice moved J.O. to center last year, I think a little piece of that was, hey, I'm going to try to help this guy in the NFL. Go ahead and
100%
and learn some center, because he's, with his size, that's what he's probably going to play at the next level. And there's nothing wrong with that, per se. I just, it's difficult for us to watch on this side and be like, well, he's so great at guard and tackle, but it just didn't work out for whatever reason against Nevada. Obviously, that was a dumb choice. Hindsight is 2020.
No, 100%. And I'm not trying to like say that they were dumb for doing that, because in practice, I mean, if you were out there, and I think, would that have been, you got the like one practice or whatever?
No, when I was there in the spring, when I was in the spring, J.O. looked good.
100%. It was like, oh my gosh, like, this is perfect. I mean, this is the easiest move ever. Like, they're gonna have Ja'Kai Clark and Ben Sparks at right guard, and it's gonna be, look at this. They're gonna be strong on the interior and doing this and that, and they were. I mean, like, the offensive line was fine for 80% of the season.
Yeah, because we had a conversation. Me, Coach Justice, Jeremy, Thalen were like, well, we wish we had Branson, but man, look at J.O. It was just one of those deals.
Like, you don't know what you don't know until the games. Like, and that was, you can go to Brashard Smith on that. You can go to what Kevin ended up doing. You could go to Kobe Wilson, back when he was first getting his start back at SMU, and not to get into all sorts of different, storylines of that. But that's why that I think Garen Justice did an underrated job this year, because they tried something. It didn't necessarily work the way they really thought, or anyone thought. Like, anybody who was out of practice will tell you this was going to be great for Jo. I mean, it was going to, just lead to the NFL and all those things. And who knows, he'll still have, with that versatility, have a good shot to make a roster at some point. But the way he adjusted with a group that turned out to not be what he probably thought on the edges at the very least, to adjust well enough, and obviously Kevin helps, but they really had a lot of success rushing the football, protecting well enough. I mean, it wasn't. I still think and this is why they brought in guys like Zion. You have Chamblee who's healthy now, hopefully, and you have Dermot Odoms. That's why those are so critical, because you have so much more talent now on the edges, in a sense.
Yeah,
So.
It'll be imperative for us to allow those tackles to win their one-on-one battles, because when you're having to, in a game against Penn State, where yes, Abdul Carter is a unicorn.
Yeah.
No matter what Penn State lines up in, we're sliding to Abdul Carter. That creates some really, really tough mismatches on the opposite side, where we're having to read out of it, or we're having to waste the back end protection every single time. It really limits your game plan. So that's why I think tackle is going to be the biggest question mark, and hopefully our biggest success this spring.
Yeah. Maybe in the dog days of summer, we go through some of that, get your take on the Penn State game a little bit, because I do think there's a deeper discussion on how much should have SMU. Like, that would actually be a good, not to dog the podcast down with that conversation, but, the conversations around how you prepare for extraordinary pass rushers. Because there's Abdul Carter, and then there's everybody else in this draft. But they played well against Donovan Ezraku, one of the top pressure guys in Boston College. Maybe it was that BC didn't have a good enough team around him, but they managed that fairly well. So I don't know. There's a lot of, we are now in it on the spring previews, and it's just so much fun. And speaking of fun, it'd be a great time to jump on with our friends at Status Jet. So mention On the Pony Express for a discount on a round trip flight with our friends at Status Jet. Plan out some work trips, take clients. Again, you could write it off for your company, which is nice. You can plan out your summer vacations early. And oh, by the way, they're already planning on how to get you from point A to point B for SMU football, getting into the planning stages of that. So make sure you talk with Status Jet about your options and mention On the Pony Express for a discount on a round trip flight. All right, Hayden Howerton, this is another one in the books, a fun one. A lot of like storylines around this group, and just kind of, I don't want to say uneasy, but maybe it did have a sense of an uneasy feeling on this podcast as we talked about it, but they'll be in good shape, I think.
Yeah, I'm confident in the ability with the guys that they've added. Because I think their additions outweigh their subtractions from just a pure talent perspective. However, talent doesn't always win football games. There were plenty of guys that were extremely talented that walked into the O-line room. Levon Livingston, really talented guy, never touched the field for SMU. I don't think he even made it to the fall semester. So I'm not wishing that on any of the guys that we're bringing in. I'm just saying, before we start getting our socks blown off by their recruiting numbers or what they did at other schools, we got to remember there's a long way to go. There's going to be new coaching, remarks where they're going to have to learn how to take coaching from Coach Justice. They're going to have to learn how to practice. His individual is really tough.
Yeah.
A lot of guys are going to go into that for the first time and go, holy smokes, I don't know if I'm cut out for this.
You regularly see guys, toss their breakfast right back up in practice. And I'm not trying to say that like it's a lot, like, but it happens. Like in fall camp, it just kind of happens for the big guys.
Yep. Yeah, so. I was there, more times than I'd like to admit. That's just training camp. But yeah, I think of my first training camp with Tennessee Titans, it was like that. And I had come from AJ Ricker, whose individual was very slow paced. It was one guy at a time. You're going down the line. You got big breaks. And then you go to set hut. And you're rapid fire, and you're building that just game endurance and get ready to go. So that'll just be an adjustment for the new guys. But anyway, long story short, guys, I'm excited for this unit. I'm excited for the additions we brought in. I'm going to miss the guys that we lost because I do think that they're great SMU Mustangs. They were big-time players for us. But like every year in college football, the only constant is change. And so you got to get ready to go with the guys that you brought in.
Yep. All right. That does it for another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. Appreciate Mark Villasana, Northwest Insurance Agency, Thomas Auto Group, Status Jet, the whole crew of sponsors for us at On the Pony Express. And make sure you subscribe for just $1 for your first week. Jump on the message board. Spring ball is basically here. So all the practice notebooks, all the coverage, we'll have it all for you there at ontheponyexpress.com. So for Hayden Howerton, I'm Billy Embody, signing off in our rowback swag. We'll catch you next time on another edition of the podcast. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody.
Follow us on your socials on X at SMU on3 and on Instagram at on3SMU.
And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.